Hi, welcome to Echoes from the Quiet Corner. I am Shreya. Today, I want to begin not with an idea, but with a feeling. The feeling of being truly heard, not replied to, not advised, just heard. This episode is about kind of listening we don't speak of enough. The listening that holds you together when you are falling apart. The listening that shapes you before you even understand who you are. It's about my grandmother, Maria. It's about a penguin named Juan Salvador. It's about a teacher called Anne. It's also about a girl who never got to speak freely named Echo. So these all are small stories. I'll start with the story about my grandmother, Maria, who didn't have the luxury of elaborate words, but she didn't need them. She knew the language of presence. As a child, I often spoke more than necessary. I made up stories, described impossible dreams, invented people I would never meet. I still do that. And she just sat there, eyes steady, never looking away, not distracted, not correcting, just listening. It wasn't a performance, it was an indulgence. It was something deeper, a sacred act of attention. In ancient Greek, there is a word, sophrosone. It's the harmony of self, temperance, dignity. She was that word, anchored, quiet, wise. She made space for me, not because she had to, but because she knew what it meant to be received. In her silence, I was not invisible. I was seen. It took me several years to understand what my grandmother was truly giving me. In a world that applauds quick wit and louder voices, listening feels like the quiet rebel. Most of us are trained in evaluative listening. We wait for the pause just so we can speak. But the kind of listening that heals, that transforms, is generative. It doesn't ask, oh, what can I say back? It asks, can I carry what you've just given me? And sometimes it's not a person who teaches us this. Sometimes it's a creature from the sea. I recently watched the movie The Penguin Lessons. An old English teacher in Argentina named Tom stumbles upon a heartbreaking sight, a beach littered with oil soaked penguins dying silently after a storm. But one of them, still breathing, looks up at him. He can't walk away. He wraps the penguin in towels, smuggles him into his residence just because his friend forced him to do so, washes him gently in the bathtub. He names him Juan Salvador. It means John the Savior. When he tries to release the penguin refuses to leave. The penguin stays. And so, just like that, Juan Salvador becomes a silent companion at a boys' boarding school. Juan follows the students during walks, watches them during sports, stands beside them in the courtyard. No tricks, no sounds, just presence. And the boys begin to soften. One boy, painfully shy, begins reading aloud just to Juan because somehow the penguin listens better than most people do, even better than his parents and friends. There is no applause, no judgment, just a pair of patient eyes. And it's enough to make that boy speak without fear. That's the thing about listening. It asks nothing but gives everything. And it reminded me again of my grandmother because sometimes the deepest bonds are built in silence. There is yet another story. that shows that listening is not just about healing, it can also be a revelation. Helen Keller, blind and deaf since infancy, lived in a world of absolute silence and darkness until one day a teacher named Anne Sullivan came into her life. Anne didn't lecture. She didn't try to fix Helen. She sat beside her, and into the palm of Helen's hand, she began spelling words slowly, patiently, again and again. At first, Helen didn't understand. The shapes meant nothing. But Anne didn't stop. She just kept listening with her hands, her heart, her whole being. Then it happened. One day at the water pump, Anne placed Helen's hand under the stream and spelled Water into her other palm. Suddenly, Helen understood the sensation, the shape, the word, it all aligned. In that moment, she wasn't just given language, she was given connection. Someone had listened to her silence long enough to meet her there. Listening didn't just open her world, it created it. But not all stories of silence end in revelation or comfort. Some end in loss. There is a haunting myth from ancient Greece of a nymph named Echo and a boy named Narcissus. Echo was cursed, unable to speak her thoughts. She could only repeat the last words others spoke. A life without original voice, a life of responding, never being received. And then she met Narcissus, a boy so enchanted by his own beauty. He listened only to himself, not in words, but in gaze, not in thought, but in reflection. Echo fell in love, but when she stepped forward, he saw only distraction. He rejected her. She faded into grief, slowly, until only her voice remained, echoing endlessly without anyone to answer it. But Narcissus, too, was cursed. One day he saw his reflection in a still pool of water. He fell in love with it, unable to look away. He reached for it, spoke to it, waited for it to respond, but it never did. Because reflections don't listen, they only reflect. And so he withered, consumed not by vanity, but by the absence of relationship, inability to look outward. This is not just a myth, it's a mirror. Echo faded because no one listened. Narcissus perished because he never listened beyond himself. And in that listener, we find two truths of modern life. To not be heard is to slowly disappear. To only hear yourself is to mistake isolation for intimacy. Listening, then, is not just kindness, it is connection, it is recognition, it is how we prevent others from fading and save ourselves from drowning in our own reflection. From the quiet smile of a grandmother to the gaze of a penguin, to the worn fingers of a teacher, to the fading whisper of a forgotten girl, each of these stories is asking us the same question: will you listen? Not to reply, not to solve, but to be with. Philosopher Simon Weil said, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. And maybe that's why listening feels so radical today, because it doesn't ask us to fix the world, just to witness one person at a time. So I ask you gently, who was your first listener? The one who sat with you before you knew what to say, who didn't try to name your feelings but made room for them to exist. We remember the ones who loved us, but we are shaped by the ones who listened to them, to you, to all the quiet presences still changing lives. Thank you. You've been listening to Echoes from the Quiet Corner. If this episode stirred something in you, let it rip, not with noise, but with a long loving. pause. Until next time, stay soft, stay still, stay listening. Bye.